I'll start the introductions now. So good morning, everyone. I hope you're all keeping well and safe. My name is Dan Hayes. I head up the bus and coach working groups at the Low Carbon Vehicle Partnership. We're a partnership that is funded partly by government and partly by industry to help accelerate the shift to low carbon transport. Today's webinar, as hopefully you're all aware, is about the electrification of bus fleets. We're going to be focusing on the electrification of park and ride services in York with First Group and Optare. And then we'll go on to talk about infrastructure with Pivot Power later on. Just in terms of the rules of engagement, we are recording this webinar so you can go back and view with you can go back and watch the video again. We'll also be sharing the slides after the presentation, so you'll all have access to that afterwards. If you could all stay muted and keep your videos and microphones turned off, that way we'll keep disruption to a minimum and we'll allow the speakers to answer your questions. If you have a question, hopefully you can all see the chat or conversation button, which looks like a little text message button at the bottom middle of the screen. If you could submit your questions there during the presentations, there will be 5-10 minutes for Q&As after the presentations. Similarly, if you can't access the chat conversation for whatever reason, and please drop me an email at dan.hayes or daniel.hayes@lowcvp.org.uk, and we can pitch your questions to the presenters there. So we'll give it one more minute as people joining in. Got lots of attendees, which is great to see. Hopefully you're all keeping well and sane. Very much most of us, I think, are settled into working from home, but looking forward to getting back out there as soon as possible. Okie dokie. Without further ado, I think I'll pass on to Mark Bichterman and Robert Drury to start the presentation. Rob, if you'd like to share your presentation now.
Yes, I'll just get that done. Hopefully I won't fall at the first hurdle.
Excellent. Yeah, we can see that
Great.
Nicely.
Okay, let me just so I've got control of it. Right, so you can see the presentation, okay? Yes.
Yeah, we can see you and hear clearly. Right,
great. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. I hope you find the next 20 minutes an interesting review. Today we're going to talk about the introduction of double-deck zero-emission battery electric buses to the York Park and Ride. It's a project that's developed over a couple of years. But as I said at the outset, hopefully it's an interesting case study for the all-electric bus town initiative. You will note that there are two speakers, myself, Robert Drury, I'm the Commercial Director for Optare, and Mark Bichterman, who is the Managing Director for First York. And we've been in the thick of this project throughout. I've kindly provided some exciting pictures of the two of us in action. And probably the one group that is missing from today's presentation, and really that's down to the lockdown, is York Council. So we'll over the next few slides we'll explain how this project developed, how the vehicle was selected, a little bit about the vehicle, and how the project was rolled out. We'll do a bit of a double act. So myself and Mark will do the introduction. Then Mark will go into the detail of really the expansion project around the park and ride, before I get into the detail of how we developed the EV solution. And then Mark will come back and talk about the infrastructure development that came off the back of the vehicle, before we close with a status update on the service rollout. Okay, so Mark, would you like to take the audience through the role of York and First in this project?
Yep, happy to. Good morning, everybody, and thanks, Robert, for the introduction. I think the first point I need to make is the picture that you've seen is the pre-lockdown picture of me. I don't look anything like that anymore. All this time at home. So, as Robert rightly said, I think the most important point to make initially is that there are three organizations really involved in the York Park and Ride
York Electric buses.
And the one party that's not currently in the presentation here today is City of York Council, with whom we're working very closely together in York to develop, promote, and make York Park and Ride happen. So York, for those of you that haven't been there, a beautiful city, medieval, a city that you can pretty much guarantee has been built to make it very difficult to operate buses at some point in the future, because of very narrow streets and all the challenges that come with that. Those challenges are mainly around congestion and the fact that you can't really build your way out of it in York without knocking down really, really old buildings. And it also comes with an air quality issue. Because obviously you have narrow streets, you have high buildings, you got this canyonization effect where pollution hasn't got anywhere to go really, and that alongside York's general very positive attitude to public transport has led the council to invest in Park and Ride and make sure it develops. And with that, I think the most kind of important step in the last few years, I guess, has been the introduction of the first electric bus fleet from 2014 onwards, and other developments that took place at the same time, which I'll touch on a little bit later regarding opening of additional sites and so on. So that's York. On the other side, you've got First Group. First York is part of First Group, is one of the smaller subsidiaries of the UK bus division. First Group, hopefully many of you will know, is an international player in public transport, bus services, rail services in the UK, quite a heavy presence in North America as well. For York, it's an operation of about 100 vehicles, 250 drivers, and then another 50 or so support staff, about 50,000 journeys a day pre-COVID, and a very close partnership between First and City of York Council, as I touched on earlier. And I think the other thing to mention, there are some real milestones with electric vehicle operation that First has achieved together with City of York Council. We're now up to 1 million electric miles, which for a fleet of 12 vehicles on a Park and Ride service is no mean feat, and has been a great achievement for the team. Robert, I don't know if you want to touch on Optare.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark. Just really to introduce Optare to those people who don't know us, we're one of the UK's largest bus manufacturers. We can trace our history back about 100 years to Charles Rowe in Leeds, and we've been based in Leeds throughout our history, or near Leeds throughout our history. We've really pioneered EV buses in the UK. We started building our first bus for service, full PSV low floor bus in 2010. So we've got about a decade's experience now of operating these vehicles in a range of applications, from park and ride through to scheduled services in London. All the buses are designed and built in the UK, and approximately a third of all electric buses in service today in the UK are Optare branded. We, as Mark said, we were involved with the electrification of the park and ride from its outset in 2014, and that was really with our first generation bus, first generation single decks. And the bus we're talking about today really represents a third generation product. So we've been on a bit of a journey since then. So what I'll do is I'll move on to the next slide, where Mark will take you through really the genesis of this project and the drivers for change.
Thank you, Robert. So I'm just wait for the slide to move on.
It's decided to stop. Let me just see if I can move that.
So while Robert is working on that, I think York Park and Ride.
Wrong way there.
Is it working? So York Park and Ride, again, it's I trust that some of you already know about it, but if you don't, it is one of the UK's largest park and ride schemes. We have 6 park and ride sites kind of dotted around the ring road of York, and it's covers all the key arterial routes that approach York, A64 from kind of the west to the east, and the A19 from the north, the A19 then obviously on the other side towards the south as well. So we had an initial 5 sites until 2014, and then an additional site was added on the A59, so towards Harrogate. That is the picture you can see in the bottom right corner there. These are purpose-built sites, whereas the others sometimes built on old car parks, so to speak. And we have a site that's integrated with the designer outlet center on the A19. So altogether, just over 5,000 spaces. And you can read the numbers on the slides. And it's 5 million journeys a year again, and been growing, and which is something we hadn't seen certainly in the recent years, but as of last year, we managed to stimulate growth and promote park and ride. Now, what's probably worth pointing out when it comes to York Park and Ride is a very mixed market. We have the normal kind of commuter market, and certainly the one that we're targeting the most. And we also have a very solid leisure market that, especially in the summer months, delivers really strong performance and plays a key part in keeping cars out of York. What we, I touched earlier with when the electric vehicles were introduced, one of the things that needed to happen at the same time was clearly driver engagement and getting our people on board with operating electric vehicles. And those of you working in the bus industry probably will know that when a driver has made up their mind on a particular bus, it is very difficult to change it. So a lot of work went into bringing our people on board to promote electric vehicles and loft them, so to speak, because that wasn't there from the inset. These people have been driving diesel buses for many years. So York Park and Ride, a very popular scheme, one that forms about 30-something% of our business here in York, and one that we have committed to for another 7 years last year. So we now have that contract through to 2025, been awarded in a competitive tendering process, and one that came with a commitment to invest in an additional electric bus fleet, which is where this project here stems from. I think, Robert, if you're right to go to the next slide. Nope. Robert, can you hear me? Hello.
I'm just trying to get this to move. Hang on. Let's go do this.
I would have said we could have brought printed slides.
Keeps going to sleep. Sorry.
So with the investment in the electric vehicle fleet, what we also wanted to do is refresh Park and Ride and continue the growth that we've seen over the last year. Now, the old, what I call old Park and Ride brand, dating back to kind of the 90s, getting a little bit tired. The little red squiggle that some of you might be familiar with needed to be updated. So we said we'll change the brand altogether, go big and bold. We know that had worked when we initially did some marketing activity still under the old brand, which did stimulate growth successfully. We've done a lot of customer research that identified that the biggest issue with Park and Ride really was that customers weren't necessarily aware of it. We're driving past Park and Ride sites every day to be sitting in queues of traffic and buses flying past them in the bus lane on the way into York. So we needed to promote that, and that is why we went with the kind of completely new brand that you can see on the screen here. I can't tell you exactly at what point we came up with the why. We know it was fairly close to some existing brands, mainly Welcome to Yorkshire. But it was all about combining the kind of electric nature of the park and ride. So when this project closes, we will have the majority of vehicles, apart from a small group of 6, electrified. So park and ride will be electric, and we wanted to get that out as much as possible. But the other thing we wanted to achieve at the same time was give it a premium feel. Park and ride is a premium product, and we wanted to set it apart from general bus services in York. So the bronze deep blue coloring scheme, together with the embroidered leather seats, which I'm afraid I can't show you on the screen at the moment, but you will see them in the next month or so. If you look for pictures, it looks the part, and it looks very much like the premium product that we wanted to achieve. Now, it is, again, it's worth pointing out, journeys on York Park and Ride aren't long distance. People at the most are on these buses for maybe for like 20 minutes on the longer journeys, and we therefore didn't need to have tables on board and things like that. We focused very much on what is important to the customer, information, and getting the capacity at the same time. Because Park and Ride gets very, very busy, especially in the Christmas time when we have seen days where the sites are full and we had to turn people away. So we needed to make sure that we can provide this capacity. Again, keep in mind where we come from. We come from operating articulated buses, real crowd movers, going into the concept of double-deck buses, which I think Robert will touch on in a second. And the other thing we wanted to make sure is apply this new brand consistently across the network, so not just on the buses, but on the sites, in the marketing and branding activity that we're doing. And again, you can see some of the pictures here that we're starting to achieve that. Had a bit of a hold up, as you can imagine, with the COVID pandemic, but continuing to implement this brand at the same time as those buses roll out.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I will now try and move the slide again, and we'll talk about developing the EV solution. Hopefully that was a useful background for you. Let me just see if I can move this slide, because it's, for whatever reason, so I think it's fair to say that the 2014 project was probably at the time the largest EV project that we'd done. We'd done a small number of very small park and ride projects in various provincial towns, and we just finished a small route in London as well when we did this route, and I think we've learned a lot of lessons over the last 6 years in a successful rollout of an electric program, and really it's about partnership from all the stakeholders, and it's about an end-to-end solution. And it's very important that there is a single stakeholder that leads this, and I think we've seen the benefits of first leading this partnership to deliver an end-to-end solution. I think it's fair to say in the first project there were a number of stakeholders with changing views of how the project should evolve. So and really that reflects where the technology was at the time. So a lot of work's been put in the preamble to make sure that we've got a robust solution that we implement once and it works, and really that starts with the service trials of the buses to understand the route and understand the requirements for the vehicle, and I'll come on to that in a few minutes. That obviously then defines the vehicle choice, how you're going to charge the vehicles to make sure that they can deliver the service, and obviously getting the right infrastructure in the right places to make sure that the buses are always available and have enough charge to complete the work. And then really that moves on to, okay, you've delivered the project, you've got the buses in service, you've now got to run this route for a decade or more. And so that's about understanding the whole life cost of the vehicles, what changes are going to be needed to be made during the life of those vehicles, and how it's going to be supported in the aftermarket. And a lot of that work has been done in terms of the service level agreements and the infrastructure choices that have been made at James Street, which we'll talk about through the course of the presentation. See if I can move the slide. I can. We launched the prototype Metrodecker in Birmingham in 2016, and I think the timing of that coincided with the council considering the next steps for the park and ride. At the time, the large capacity vehicles on the routes were diesel bendy buses, and they brought benefits in terms of bringing people on and off the buses. And I think the council was looking for a high capacity vehicle that really could deliver that kind of capacity and loading and unloading times, but was electric. And the EV Metrodecker came along at the right time. And given our partnership with First York, it was an ideal opportunity to trial that vehicle on that route. And indeed, it was the first service trial of that vehicle. And you can see the imagery of the bus on the right in front of the Minster. And you know, to come back to a point that Mark raised, that photograph was taken. The second photograph below was taken in August. And that shows you the kind of patronage that the park and ride gets, particularly in summer. I was really impressed by the number of people using the service, and you could see the desire and the need for a bigger vehicle. We ran the vehicle for about 3 months, so from late summer into the autumn, and really to prove the double deck concept and also prove the electric decker concept. You know, could it work on the route? Could it deliver a day's service? And we also used the opportunity to model the route and understand the consumption, typical consumption of the bus using onboard telematics. And we use the Veracity system. We fit that to all our buses. And it's a great tool for starting the whole route planning process, because it gives you real world data that you can then apply to the charging strategy and the charge demand analysis. And really, it was the success of that project that contributed to the selection of Metrodecker for the expansion. The Metrodecker, the current generation Metrodecker, and the bus that you will see on the York route, and there's an image of it when it was first sent to York just about the turn of the year, is a 300 kilowatt hour integral bodied double deck. The vehicle is developed from our existing diesel design, and in fact, the interior and exterior architecture is identical to both. If you put a diesel next to an electric, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. All the difference is in the engine space. We use modular lithium-ion, nickel, manganese, cobalt packs in the back, and we use the same packs for our single and double decks, but more obviously in the double deck. And we've moved to the ZF hub motor axle for this particular vehicle. We've seen measured improvements in efficiency, and also it's great for packaging. So it was again an ideal time to move to that technology. The prototype ran with a motor gearbox combination, which was the traditional approach. The vehicle is available in 2 lengths, and for York, we chose its longest length, which is 11.1 meters. And what's quite unique about the York bus is that it's a provincial style vehicle, but with 2 doors. And again, this is all about entrance and egress times to reduce dwell and improve capacity for the route. The vehicle has no real compromise in capacity between electric and diesel. So it has 97 passenger capacity, and and the one door 11.1 has 83 seats available. This particular bus has a second door which takes away seats, but also, as is a first group standard, it's got a buggy bay as well as a wheelchair bay, so it's 75 seats, this bus. The weight of the bus is again very similar to the diesel. It's just over 11 tons unladen, and it's plated at 18 tons, so it doesn't go above the traditional 18-ton limit. We've done a lot of work with First and indeed other operators, and the bus we've underwritten the range at 150 miles, zero emission winter range. And we've done a lot of work on the heating system for the Generation 3 product. You would be familiar with that once you move from diesel, you no longer have a heat source within the bus, so you have to generate that heat using the batteries, and typically that can take up to 30% of the energy on a cold winter's day. So we've done a lot of work on a new system that's maximizes the efficiency of the heating system, and we use preheat on charge to make sure the bus goes out warm, and we're not using valuable kinetic energy to heat the bus. And we use ambient control to maintain a temperature within the bus within certain limits, so that again we can underwrite the range, and that First know that on a cold day they can still do the journey. The bus is available with both slow AC charge options or DC fast charge. Our preferred route is to charge the bus overnight using AC to maximize battery life, and again that's a lesson from the 2014 project. The bus is charged with 2 Type 2 connectors. It has onboard chargers, so you can plug it into a wall if you wish, using 3-phase electricity, or you can use a charge point, and Mark will go through the detail of the choices that were made at the depot for York. DC charging, we use the bus runs at just over 400 volts, so we need a 200 amp charger, DC charger, and that would typically be 100 kilowatts plus, because typically they're rated at over 600 volts, but it's about 200 amps requirement, and as I said, about 100 kilowatts plus. And we use the CCS2 connector, which I think is increasingly becoming the norm for DC charging for these vehicles. So hopefully that gives you a background into the vehicle, and we'll now go on and talk a little bit about the charging strategy. So we've done the route mapping in 2017, and we got the data. That then created a discussion around the route planning, and a route was created with a 145-mile maximum run length. With the data that we got from the route, we were able to, as I say, underwrite the 150-mile range, and as such, we didn't need any charging at the park and ride sites. We were only doing overnight slow charging, which again has the benefit of maximizing battery life for the buses. We would only use fast charging for a contingency, and you'll see that in the way the infrastructure is designed, and that would be maybe if you've got a late run in or something like that, or you needed to get a bus out in service in a hurry, you'd have that option. We did look at smart charging, and we do have a smart charging solution, but having done the analysis on the costs and benefits of that, we went with just a simple charging approach, which is managed on site at the depot. So I'll pass back over to Mark now, who will take you through the infrastructure development.
Thank you, Robert. So as Robert said, we settled on looking at a vehicle that just charged overnight. We obviously were aware of other solutions available, and we have learned for the last few years how to operate vehicles that need opportunity charging. One of the main reasons why we wanted to avoid the opportunity charging approach is that it is quite costly in terms of resource. It's fairly inefficient in terms of operation, and especially again, I get back to York being a medieval city. Every time you start putting infrastructure somewhere, you have to dig a hole in the ground, and you never know what you find, and it can take quite a bit longer than you initially anticipated. Over and above that, with the rollout of that kind of level of fleet across park and ride sites, it would have meant we had to put in 6 times the infrastructure versus just one hub in the depot at James Street, which is subsequently what we ended up doing. Now, you can see from the plan on the right here, it is an extremely tight site. We had to do this upgrade while the site was fully operational. It's an absolute impressive work by our property team, David Seaton, our property manager, who's made all this happen, and led the project together with our contractors to get through this the installation, putting a new substation in, putting cabling and the charging posts in. Again, dotted all over the site because we wanted to have the maximum amount of flexibility. So a bus, for example, that goes in for some maintenance overnight and still needs to run in the morning, needs to be charged while being worked on, as much as that's allowed and possible within the engineering constraints. So we needed charging points within the workshop, as well as those that you can see with that purple line. I don't know if you can see a cursor moving, it might not be, but I don't know
if you can see that.
Yeah.
Can you see that?
So that's where the majority of the double deck buses will be charged. You can see that little white box where the cursor was just on there. That's just to the right a little bit, Robert. That's our current, or that was our current substation before we started the project, and we had to build a new substation. So all that work included a new substation having to be built, which is towards the bottom right of the picture where the purple box is with the buses a bit further down, Robert. Yeah, there. Just about a bit further up. So we put a new substation in to provide the capacity for the new fleet, but also give us some headroom for future expansion. And Robert touched on it, but the smart charging is something we didn't require because we have been able to get enough capacity into the site. But that's not to say that when we in the future we can do that fairly easily with the headroom that we have, and using smart charging, which then gives you the load balancing to get the vehicles charged overnight without having to put another substation or any further upgrades. Certainly for about a 20 or 30% increase in our electric fleet. The layout of the site at this stage is still mixed, so we still operate diesel and electric fleets. Obviously, looking forward, if that became an all-electric site, you can make further changes to it and removing the fuel points and so on, giving you additional space. But it's been a challenge. We've carried it out on budget. We carried it out without any incidents, which was fantastic. And if I can pass on any learning to fellow bus operators, or in fact anybody in the bus industry, the one thing you always want to be aware of is driver car parking, because that's something we had to limit, and that caused the most amount of noise amongst our workforce while we were carrying out this work. A few images here. Looking at the timescales again, this was all delivered between May and December. Now, might not look like much in those pictures, but you can see the rapid charger on the top right. Just next to it, you can just about make out the new substation building. So it was a lot of work that these guys had to cram into this. Just maybe touching on the rapid charger, we don't actually intend to use it for the Metrodecker fleet, but what we wanted to do is to further increase the mileage that we get out of the existing electric fleet. We've retrofitted this charger with a CHAdeMO adapter, so that allows us to rapid charge the existing small electric fleet, and we then hope to use those in the downtime that they normally have overnight, with a view to deploy them on kind of quieter evening services, and again reduce the amount of diesel buses that we're running.
Okay, thanks, Mark. So final content slide now really is just to bring you up to date with where we've got to. This is a bit of a story of a bus interrupted. The plan was to launch these vehicles for late Q1, early Q2 2020. First received their first bus in January, early January 2020, and you can see an image of it in the top right there. Really that was a preamble to the rollout in terms of depot and driver training. I don't know if you want to touch on that, Mark, at all.
Yeah, I probably have earlier already, but driver training was such an important part, because we're now shifting a lot of our drivers over to pure electric operation, especially the drivers that work on a park and ride service. And it isn't, I think we're saying the figure somewhere around 30% difference between a good electric vehicle driver and one that's not so good. So the impact on the range of the vehicle is quite significant. So we worked out a fairly detailed driver training program. Each driver is going out on the bus before they're driving it in service with a trainer, showing them all the ins and outs, obviously, of the vehicle, but also training them on kind of the defensive driving, looking forward, cruising, and using the regen facilities of the bus as much as possible. So it was something that, again, we took as a learning from the initial batch of electric vehicles in 2014, and the way or the work we had to do with drivers afterwards. This time we wanted to get on the front foot and went through that program early on. Now, again, we'll probably have to do some of this again now when the rest of the fleet gets deployed, because there's been a bit of a break, but it has been absolutely vital to get our driving force on board with that.
Yeah, and it's important to point out as well that I mentioned Vericity earlier, and again, first we're really pioneers in adopting that telematics. They used it extensively on the single decks, part of the contract was that they have full access to the Vericity data on these vehicles. So it's a good way of tracking not only vehicle performance but also driver performance and training needs. So it's a good tool for that as well. As Mark said, obviously everything was halted for lockdown. We're in the process of sign off for the vehicles, and we had all the vehicles online and a good chunk of them ready for dispatch. That stopped in March, but we reopened. I think it's 4 weeks ago now. 3-4 weeks ago, and our plan is really to start where we left off. Probably the one change is, and again, all the bus operators out there will be familiar with this, is of course these buses were designed to be open and customer friendly, so they didn't have any form of driver protection screens on them. And obviously post-COVID, that's something that we have to add. So we're in the queue for perspex at the moment, and that's something hopefully we'll be able to address by the end of June, and we should see the last of the buses delivered in the balance of the summer, with the aim to kick off late Q3, early Q4. Did you have any other comments, Mark, before I wrap up, as it were?
No, I think you covered it all. Thank you, Robert.
Okay, so that's it really. So hopefully you find that interesting, and happy to take your questions. Thank you.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Rob, and thank you very much, Mark. Very, very interesting. You covered all the topics I think people are interested in, and we've got quite a few questions coming through now. Quite a few to do with the depot, and then a few to do with the vehicles. So just on the depot, there was a question about whether or not it was leasehold or freehold, but David Seaton has mentioned that it is freehold. With the depot, is there any was there any existing legacy infrastructure from electric trams? That was one question. And is there any contingency in terms of a prolonged power outage for those electric buses at the depot?
Yeah, so we have, so I can't answer the question on the trams. I think they found some old pits somewhere when they dug one of the trenches across the depot, but nothing that and unfortunately we didn't find anything of value. So we still have to pay everything ourselves. So the question around contingency plans, that's something that's fairly close to my heart, because having worked on the railway before, I know how quickly stuff can go wrong, and when you haven't got any contingency plans, it really can obviously screw your business. We've worked out a very detailed plan, and I know I'm going to have to use the diesel word here, but yes, we have a plan in place that if there's a significant power outage and somebody cuts through a cable somewhere, we can get a big generator on site. We have played that scenario through. It will plug into the substation, and within 4 hours we're back up and running, having the buses charged overnight and service not affected.
Excellent. Okay, and then a couple of questions about the vehicles. So in terms of the existing vehicles, the smaller single decks that you've been running, what sort of kilowatt hour per kilometer performance have you seeing, and what's the has there been much around battery degradation, and what was the sort of difference in daily mileage that they're doing now compared to what they were doing sort of at the beginning in 2014?
Robert, do you want to take this one? Or
yeah, by all means, yeah. So the buses, the Versas were, the single deck Versas were 92 kilowatt hour buses, of which about 80 kilowatt hours was usable. They weigh under 9 tons, and they're doing about a kilowatt hour per mile, which is what 0.67, something like that. Have I got that right? Yeah, 0.67 kilowatt hours per kilometer, and they have diesel heating, so they are pre-electric heating, so that's important to point out. But it's fairly stable, obviously, across the year. You get a bit of a difference with winter over summer, because obviously you're running with lights and wipers more often than you are in the summer. The vehicles have lithium ion batteries, and the range of the bus is probably 70 to 80 miles, something like that, and they were doing probably peak 80 miles, 90 miles, sorry. So it was always planned that there would be a top up during the day, and they were being fast charged at quite a high rate for such a small pack, at about 45 to 50 kilowatts. And it's fair to say that probably after about 3 years, we started to see some pack degradation. And as I said in the presentation, really, you know, that's been a key learning for us in terms of battery management and how we manage that. Obviously, as packs get bigger, that becomes less of an issue. But with those buses, it became an issue, and we've done quite a lot of work with First on supporting the batteries and aiming to extend the life of those packs. I would say that our view of those vehicles and LFP is probably about a 5-year life with that cycle. Slow charging would extend that, but maximum of a 5-year life. And as I said, we were starting to see degradation probably at the end of beginning of the 4th year. So we've done quite a lot of work on that. The new vehicles have a different chemistry, and as you see, because of the size of the packs and the range of the vehicle, we don't have to do top ups.
And would you expect the new NMC batteries to last a bit longer?
Yes, I mean, it's I would say that we expect the life to be over 7 years. That's what we expect it to be. And again, this is a relatively new application for this chemistry, but we expect it to be over 7 years. And in terms of the manufacturer, they expect it to be over 7 years as well. So in terms of the battery, that's what we think.
Great stuff, thank you. And just finally, Mark, could you just touch on sort of cost savings that you've seen or hoping for with the new electric buses coming in compared to your single deck buses, whether it's just fuel costs or maintenance as well?
Yeah, so I think this is still a bit of a tricky subject for us. I mean, again, going back to the original fleet, electric fleet, you know, we had the opportunity to kind of track the spend on those vehicles quite closely. But this is still one of the big challenges that I think most bus operators put to the manufacturers. The risk or the unknowns around electric vehicles are quite, or maintenance of electric vehicles are quite significant. You know, we put a whole life cost model in for a diesel bus, and we know full well that after 7, 8, 9 years, it will need a new engine and a new gearbox, and we know exactly how much it costs. Here, what's happened in the past is that there's an excitement, obviously, with that technology, and we put it in, and then 5, 6 years later, we find ourselves with a massive bill for new packs and all the other bits on electric bus that might attract quite a significant premium. So there's no doubt that there's a clear fuel saving to be had, and this is why locally we were trying to expand the electric operation with that fleet as much as we can, because that is kind of one of the key benefits. But beyond that, we are we somewhat put in securities around the double deck fleet, and have a contract in place that protects us against those unknown costs initially. But later on in the life of that vehicle, that is still a question mark, and it's probably what makes most operators a little bit uncomfortable when it comes to electric vehicle operation.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Mark. Due to time, we're going to move on to Pivot Power now. So thank you again to Mark and Rob for that. I'm just going to introduce Marianne Costigan from Pivot Power.
Good morning.
Keep up with me. You there, Marianne?
I'm here. Good morning, everyone.
Great stuff. So just for information, LowCVP are developing a suppliers portal for our website. And the suppliers portal is going to be a one-stop shop for anyone interested in electrification, or be that other technologies that can help us on the shift to net zero transport. Pivot Power, just to introduce them quickly, they are offering high voltage connections with guaranteed future capacity and price certainty in selected locations across England and Wales. And they're also developing the world's largest transmission connected battery storage and electric vehicle charging network here in the UK. So I'm now just going to share a video from Marianne, and then we'll take some questions and answers as well. So hopefully this will complement the presentation that we just had from York in terms of vehicles and infrastructure. So let's share this video. Where's it gone? Where's it gone? Can't seem to find it anywhere.
Oh, I can always talk if that's easier.
Yeah, if let me just give me a second. I'll if you want to just start the introduction, and then I'll get it up. It's not letting me share it for some reason.
Sure. Yeah. So Pivot Power is, as Dan said, we're rolling out two things. We're rolling out grid scale battery storage at multiple locations around the country, and that battery storage will connect directly to the transmission network and help the national grid to balance the system. So as we have more and more renewable energy in the country, we need to make sure that there is a balance and that things work throughout the cycle of wind and sun and everything else that's going on. What we then are also doing, because we have those connections to the national grid, because we have a desire to accelerate the transition to electric transport, is that we are going to run. And now I'm hearing an echo. Is that the same for everybody?
No, I think that's just you. I've just loaded the video. So shall I play?
Okay. Would you rather do that?
Yeah. Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, Marianne. Okay.
Hi, this is Marianne Costigan from Pivot Power. I'll be explaining how we can support bus operators planning to make the transition to an electric fleet. Pivot Power, recently acquired by EDF Renewables, has a dual mission. Firstly, we want to support a clean, affordable and secure national energy system by providing valuable flexibility through storage. Secondly, we want to accelerate the electric vehicle revolution by offering multi-megawatt power for electric vehicle charging locations. So what does that mean in practice? Over the next few years, Pivot Power will be investing in grid-scale batteries at 40 sites across England and Wales to deliver up to 2 gigawatts of energy storage. Energy storage is a critical enabler for the UK to reach its net zero goal by 2050, providing flexible capacity to enhance the reliability of our electricity network and to increase the integration of renewable generation. The recent lockdown has given us a glimpse of a more renewable energy future, with zero coal being used for the last 3 weeks. But this does cause stresses on the system that needs to be kept in balance throughout. More importantly for bus operators, the second aspect of our business model is about developing private wire networks at each of these locations. We are connecting directly to National Grid's high voltage transmission network, and will use a private wire to deliver power to EV charging locations nearby. This approach enables Pivot Power to bypass capacity constraints on the local distribution network and offer fleet operators and super hubs and MSAs multi-megawatt connections with guaranteed future capacity and predictable connection costs. An example of where we will do this is in Oxford, where this year we're connecting and we'll be developing a private wire network across the ring road to serve several locations with EV charging, including the Oxford City Council's own fleet, public charge points at the Red Bridge Park and Ride, and potentially Oxford's bus operators as well. But does capacity matter? Well, lack of capacity has been clearly identified as a barrier by the bus industry, both collectively at the CPT and individually as well. And not just by bus operators, but also by charge point operators and other players trying to electrify their fleets. So what makes Pivot different when it comes to capacity? Well, our unique model enables us to offer fleet operators multi-megawatt connections from the beginning, with the option to scale quickly and easily at a known cost. So we can allow fleet operators to begin the transition to electric with a 1 or 2 megawatt connection and then add capacity as your electric fleet grows, ensuring that the pricing remains consistent throughout the transition. This makes it easier to plan and to budget. If you're a local authority hoping to generate additional benefits, as well as electric buses, an investment in Pivot's private wire network could give you just that. As well as meeting the capacity requirements of an all-electric bus town, we expect that Pivot Power's EV charging network will serve as a catalyst to encourage adoption of other types of EVs, including public passenger cars, logistics fleets, taxis, etc. A relatively small investment in the charging infrastructure for buses could therefore unlock significant further private sector investment, supporting the transition to electric transport more broadly and enabling an improvement in air quality and a reduction in carbon emissions across a city. If all this sounds just too good to be true, yes, there is a catch. We are only where we are, and in most cases, we're not there yet. Our first connections later this year are in Kent and, as mentioned earlier, in Oxford. Next year, 2021, we focus on the Midlands, and then we will extend across the country. Please check our website to find out if we will be in a location near you, or go to bit.ly/find-pivot. And if we are, please do get in touch. Thank you for listening.
Great stuff. Marianne, was there anything that you wanted to add to the presentation there?
I think that was the bulk of it. Yeah, I was just quickly checking my National Grid app to see if the coal record had continued to stand, or the no coal record, and it has, so that's good news for everyone who cares about these things. But yeah, I think we're always happy to hear from bus operators and local authorities, and as you can see, we are fairly spread across the country, but still in the process of determining exactly which locations will come online when. So open to hearing from you and understanding your needs.
Okay, just to kick the questions off, you mentioned that you've got 40 sites across the UK, and they're sort of specific sites, and you're either in the right location or you're not. If you're a local authority and you might be in one of these areas, what should you be doing in terms of understanding, preparing for, how they can engage with you? Should they be forming a working group with all of the businesses in their area to let them know about this capacity? What should the role of the local authority be in supporting this?
Yeah, so I think we've engaged obviously very closely with the local authority in Oxford, and are also beginning to do so in the West Midlands locations where we're planning for next year. The initial conversation is important, just to sort of work out when the interest is in terms of years and when we can make that connection available. And then the local authorities really have a great opportunity to convene the relevant interested parties, and to sometimes take the lead themselves in terms of electrifying their own transport fleets, as is the case in Oxford. But also they'll have a really good understanding of what the requirements are in their area, and the other businesses, both transport and others who might be interested. So it's a really great opportunity to work together on finding a solution that can help as many people as possible.
Okay, and in terms of the obviously it's relatively early days, but how replicable do you think the sort of work that you're doing in Oxford and Kent at the moment will be for the other sites? Is it going to be a case that you can sort of pick up and drop the same model across, or do you think it's going to have to be a different situation every time?
I think that there's going to be huge learnings for us from our first two sites, and we very much expect that we will be able to deploy very similar instances, especially on the battery side, in future locations. With the private wire network, obviously, you're always having to deal with local geography, and it really depends on the route and the requirements there. But we're obviously learning a lot more in terms of what is needed, both infrastructure-wise and on the operator side, and I think that really will help us going forward.
Great stuff. Okay, and in terms of bus operators and them, sort of the attraction for them to connecting into your private wire network in a town, will they always get the best price, or compared to sort of going it themselves and trying to connect to the grid themselves? And there's a question from Paul Hawker here. It says, do you charge up front for those connections as well for operators?
Oh yeah, I see that question. So I think one of the issues that we've heard with the DNOs is not necessarily that they're always expensive, but that it's extremely difficult to predict what the price will be. And that essentially depends on the capacity and the headroom that they have available in their local network. So because the DNOs are obliged to serve all the customers locally, businesses and domestic, there is less control over what will happen. So on the other hand, with our private wire network, we will serve a very small number of customers, and if we're in discussions with the bus operator, we are able to guarantee that we can provide that capacity to them. In terms of whether we charge up front, so we will have a charge up front for a connection, but we will only, because you can have that confidence about future supply, you only need to pay up front for the connection that you will need, and then you can upgrade with confidence in subsequent years. And we may also, if we see the need, we may also allow you to reserve capacity for a small percentage of the connection fee if demand grows, and we see that there's a lot of demand for the capacity in future.
Great stuff. We've got a question. Sorry, is there anything else?
I was just going to comment on that 10K
yeah
restriction. So it depends, right? So the 10K is a guideline, but really that's probably the most distance that would be economically viable in order to lay our cable route from our national grid connection out to a customer location. However, that could be different if it was a very easy route through council land or farmland or something where digging is really easy. And obviously, if it turned out that there was serious DNO constraints in the local area, then the price was unaffordable, then it may be that travelling further with pivot would be the better option. But that's the kind of rule of thumb maximum for us.
Great stuff. Okay. I guess we could have one or two more questions. We have hit 12 o'clock, but I guess there's more stuff that I'd like to ask you around. What's the sort of timescale for laying your private wire in terms of when you started the project with, say, Oxford, and when you expect to sort of complete laying all the cabling?
So in Oxford, we're at the planning stage of the cable route. So we will be probably starting that actual work in August timeframe, and I think it will probably take about a maximum of 4 to 5 months to complete that work. But the sort of the time is involved really in doing the planning and obviously getting planning permission, working with the contractors. All of these things are what we've learned at Oxford, and we will be able to run through more smoothly in future.
Perfect. In terms of sort of PV generation or anyone looking at putting up, solar farms or wind turbines near your private wires, do you foresee, being able to integrate sort of on-site generation or storage externally into yours, aside from your existing battery?
We aim to be able to support other generation on the private wire, and we're actually looking into that as part of the Oxford project. It does create some complications in terms of what our battery is doing, but we're expecting that we'll find a way to manage it.
Excellent. Okay. Great stuff. Thank you very much, Marianne. Were there any other questions? I don't think there were. Excellent. Okay. We've gone a little bit over time, but I hope everyone who's attended found that interesting and engaging. We have recorded the presentation, so you can go back and watch it again. We will be sharing the slides as well, so you'll be able to have access to those and go through them in detail. If you have any follow-up questions, please let us know. We've got a couple more workshops coming up in the near future. So another one that's free for anyone to attend, members and non-members of LowCVP. Next Tuesday afternoon on the 9th from 2 o'clock, we will be with Newport Bus, Zenobē Energy and Yutong, and we're going to be focusing on the electrification of Newport's depots, as well as the deployment of on-site battery storage, and touching a little bit on the leasing contract that Newport have arranged with Zenobē and Yutong. You can register again via Eventbrite. The link's embedded into the slides, and I'll also send a follow-up email with the link. Of interest as well, if you're interested in electric infrastructure, we are kicking off our first meeting of the Energy Infrastructure Working Group at LowCVP next Thursday at 2 o'clock on the 11th. If you're not a member of LowCVP and you want to join up to get involved, but then please let me know. You can drop me an email or similarly drop the Secretariat email, and save a date, which will be free for members as well, is our annual conference on the 15th of July. So hopefully you found that all very useful, and please drop me an email if you want to follow up with any other questions. So thank you all again, and I'll just stop the recording now.